All right, I would like to call the Township of Wainfleet regular council meeting of February 21st, 2023 to order. Please stand for the national anthem. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather as traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Nope. Okay. Please note that our live broadcast will not be available this evening due to technical issues. These meeting proceedings are being recorded and will be made available through the township website and YouTube tomorrow. We'd like to extend our sincere condolences to the family on Perry Road, recently impacted by a fire in the home. The Niagara Regional Council's Budget Committee of the Whole settled on a 2023 levy budget at 7.29% for the region's portion of property tax bills. This will go before the full Regional Council Thursday, February 23rd for approval. There will be a special meeting of council held February 28th at 7 p.m. where we will be considering the operating budget. Special meetings are not typically live streamed, however, they are open to the public to attend. Our next regular meeting of council will be Tuesday, March 21st at 7 p.m. Are there any announcements or remarks from members of council? Okay. Next, I'm going to move on to the adoption of the previous council minutes. Are there any comments, corrections for the draft minutes listed on the agenda? Okay, then I have a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of council February 7th, 2023 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover in a second? Councilor Van Fleet, Councilor Gilmore. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry. We are doing recorded vote. So we'll start with you, Councilor McCullen.
In favor.
Thank you. Councilor Van Fleet.
In favor.
In favor. Councilor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councilor Anderson.
In favor.
Thank you. And that's carried. We don't have anything for public meeting, no delegations. We're going to move right to the staff report. CDS 001 2023 regarding short-term rental licensing bylaw. Ms. Earl, would you like to give us a brief overview of your report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the rest of council. Given the continued expansion of the STR industry, it's envisioned that the number of STRs in the township will continue to increase. As council has identified a need to further regulate short-term rental accommodations, this staff report provides council with an updated draft STR licensing bylaw for consideration. Staff are looking for council's direction in order to finalize the township's approach to STRs in a timely manner, as this decision to move forward with licensing bylaw will have a direct impact on the township's operational budget considerations. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions or comments? No. Councilor McClellan, sorry.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Through my circumstances over the last 2 weeks, I've stayed at 2 or 3 different Airbnbs down in Massachusetts. They run a licensing for the town or the municipality that has them. Some of them require that you have video surveillance on the outside of the building. They require no more than 6 people in a building at any time. Anything over 3 bedrooms is considered a hotel and needs a commercial license. They also have noise recorders. And right in one of the ones I'm staying in right now, it says by 10 o'clock, everything must be shut down. And at no time are you to get, so they record the noise levels. If I go over a certain decibel of noise outside the house, or there's a $700 fine and you're asked to leave immediately. So looking at some of the stuff we're dealing with, that might be something we need to look at before we start passing this. And there's other municipalities here that do a lottery. And you get in, and if you go over your point system or you have too many infractions, you lose your license. You get called in once or twice for a warning, and then you lose your license, and they just let somebody else get a license, and you're out of the business because you're not operating properly. So, Will, I'm not sure of these things we can do. Some of them I'm told are done in Niagara already through Airbnbs. So maybe it's something we need to look at, but I don't see any of this in here, and I don't think we're strict enough.
Any other comments, questions? Councilor Wainfleet?
Through you, Chair. Lindsay, in 4.12, it said that all guests have to be off the premises by 11 p.m. I'm just wondering, should we maybe change that? 11 p.m. seems a little late. And also, guests, can we cap the amount of guests? Because if I know one of the biggest complaints we have about one of them is that it's a bachelor party house. So everybody would just come in during the day and then just leave at night. So you could say you're having 6 people on your agreement, but then you're inviting 20. So can we cap it? I don't know what the number would be, but I think that's something we should look at.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the inquiry. It's up to council's decision, the timing for guests. Previously, when I brought it forward, there wasn't much discussion on visitors or what we call non-occupying guests. We assumed that there was going to be people staying overnight. It's up to council's discretion if they'd like to make it an earlier time and then limit number of guests or have no guests. So staff are open to what council would like.
I mean, I think they would want guests. I mean, if I rented an Airbnb, I would want my kids to come with their kids, not stay for the whole week, but come and visit me and then leave. I like that. And then my other question was, 10.1. I have to look up. I don't know what it's about. That wasn't it. G. Oh, okay. So the license administrator responsible believes that the short-term rental unit being licensed poses a threat to the health and safety of persons or property. And it says that, whose discretion is that up to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the discretion would be the license administrator. So in this case, it would be the bylaw enforcement official.
Thanks, Lindsay.
You're very welcome. I'm not sure if, Mr. Mayor, you would like me to address Councillor McClellan's comments as well. He's sitting there listening and I didn't get a chance to address some of them. We talked about, Councillor mentioned limiting the number of people. That's something that the draft bylaw does in fact do now. We limited it to up to 3 bedrooms, which would be a maximum of 8 people. So if council decides that they don't want 8 people for a 3-bedroom home, it could be something reduced. We talked about noise recorders. We have talked about that through the noise bylaw as well. And that's something that's a tricky situation because who's going to be purchasing the noise recorders? If we make it mandatory, residents may have different types of recording devices. They're not calibrated the same. So it's really hard to determine what the calibers are going to be for noise decibel levels. A 10 p.m. shutdown was mentioned. That's absolutely possible as well. The noise bylaw that we had just passed last year would be in effect in addition to the licensing bylaw. So we can limit it or reduce that if necessary. That would probably be more for the non-occupying guests, as we just discussed. And then the last point was the demerit point system, which under section, I believe it's 10, licenses can be revoked. So in the bylaw, there's a whole demerit point system depending on what the infractions are. Should a licensee have more than 10 demerit points, they can have their license suspended or revoked, and that would be up to the officer's discretion. So that has been included, Councillor McClellan.
Go ahead, Councilor McClellan.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Earl. Your demerit points, how long do they stay in effect?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it's up to 2 years.
Yeah, so, you know, your driver's license is 3 years, you get so many points. And if you get called in for an interview and you get told if you get any more, they're gone. If you lose your operating rights, 3 months, if you lose in October, it doesn't cost you a dime, right? So you should lose it until your next round of points fall off so that you're under whatever the magic number is. We have 10 points, 12 points, 15 points. If they sit there for a year, sorry about your luck, that's your penalty. You have to be a good operator. It's not up to us. And the same with the noise thing. That should be up to them. And if we get a noise complaint, they can come in and say, no, it wasn't that loud. And they should record it. This is on them. They want to run a business. Why do we want to have to police it? Let them police themselves and have the penalties hard enough that they will police themselves. You know, there's good operators in town. There's people that have been doing it for 40 years and haven't had a problem.
Mr. Mayor, to council. And again, this is the type of feedback and the type of direction or input staff would like to receive from council. We've heard the discussion now, potentially a 3-year holding of that demerit information versus the 2 that's currently proposed. We've heard 10 p.m. instead of 11 p.m. Again, the types of tweaks or the type of massaging that council's doing now. The hope is that at the conclusion of this meeting, council will give that direction to staff such that we can go back, make the necessary amendments to the bylaw, and bring you a finalized bylaw for further consideration at a future meeting.
Mr. Earl, I'll ask the question. I would like to see the initial offense for operating without a license increased, as well as the subsequent second. And then can you just confirm that the licensing structure right now will include the fire inspection annually? And then my next question, I'll just let you answer them all at once. This will also include all residential properties along the lakeshore that are currently operating multi-cottage rentals, anything that is not zoned commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the rest of council. Staff have no issues with increasing you were referring to the penalty fines for first and second offenses for operating and advertising without a license. Not a problem. We can increase that. Right now it's 1,500 and 2,000. Is there a specific number you'd like to see that increase to?
I would let, I thought I saw your hand up there. I would like to see it go to 2,000 for your first, 2,500 for your second.
Noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We talked about including fire inspections in the requirements for new licenses and renewals. Yes, the fire inspections will be included. It will be up to the fire chief should they require a new one every single year. So he will review the fire safety plan as part of the renewal licenses and make that determination if an inspection is required. It may or may not be each year. And as far as the designations for residential properties and current properties operating under commercial license, short-term rental licensing bylaw will apply to all properties that are residentially zoned. If there is a property that has a tourist commercial or resort commercial type designation, they are not subject to this because they have their own specific zoning amendment that would have allowed them to operate. Thank you.
Councilor McLeod?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, reading some of the bylaws in the municipalities I'm in here, and they've been added a lot longer than we have. For operating without a license, first offense is $5,000, second offense is 10, third is 15, and then it goes to $20,000 every time you do it. You know, we don't want them operating without a license. $2,000 is a joke when you're getting $1,000 a night. You know, the parking, they only allow, you have to come in, if you are operating, you have to come in and show that you can accommodate 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars. And the building official goes out and checks them, and they have to give you a drawing. And if it doesn't, you can't get 4 cars on your lot without parking on the street. You only get whatever number of cars you can. And there's nobody allowed to park on the street. Like, I don't want to be mean, but we got to get our fire chief and our fire trucks down these streets as well.
Ms. Rowe, would you like to speak to those comments?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a significant increase to the penalty fines that you have proposed. So I'm looking to council for their thoughts on it, only because technically under the AMP's provisions, penalties shouldn't be punitive in nature. So starting at 5,000, going up to 20,000 may be a bit high, in my opinion.
I understand.
Through you, Mayor. At the Roma conference this year in Toronto, the tiny township presented on short stay rentals and all of their problems. I'm sure you're aware of that, Lindsay. And also Prince Edward County, it's been added a long time. Quite a wonderful presentation. Since 2011 until 2022, Prince Edward County has a lot of people live on the property, have 3 or 4 cabins, and it's a very big fishing area. A lot of people go down into Bay Quinte area and that for fishing. So sort of principal resident, lots of cottages. From 2011 to 2022, they found out that operating without a license, operating, advertising incorrectly or falsely were a great issue. And so if you look at the 2022 fine structure from Prince Edward County, Councilor McClellan's quite right on. Their fines were 10,000, 15, and 20,000. They were dealing with delinquent people who refused to register and license and were just really huge complaint areas. So there is precedent. It's a standing bylaw in another township that's dealt with it a lot longer than we have. So I'm just putting that out for consideration. And if I may continue, Mayor, to the chief, fire chief, addressing Sherry's point. If you go into a lot of buildings where groups of people are allowed to participate in events, there's usually a population density in a building. You rent a hall, you can only have 100 guests. You go into a theater, it only sits so many people. So I'm just wondering, Chief, is there some sort of fire standard where if a building's 1,500 square feet, can we really cruise in with 40 people?
Yeah, I can take that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So all buildings through the building code and the fire code do have occupancy limits based on the intended use. In the case of residential buildings, they are not listed in any of those kind of constructs. You know, assembly occupancies like a community hall or a church, they would have those occupancy limits, but it's not placed on residences. So certainly we could take a look at those spaces. But I think, you know, the best indicator of limiting people would be by bedroom, you know, the number of people per beds.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Absolutely. I think that we should have 2 people to a bedroom. I think if you have a 3-bedroom rental, you could have 6 people. I think we need to make some allowance for people that want to bring their children. You know, children under 5 or 6 can stay with mom and dad in a room. But I think that we need to limit the short stay here to 3 bedrooms, even if you have a 5-bedroom property. That just makes more room for more people. They stay in all the bedrooms, sleep in all the couches and on the floor. So I think we need to, I agree with the 3-bedroom. I think 2 adults per bedroom. If they have a couple of children that cuddle in with mom and dad, that's probably more than appropriate. That sounds like a family holiday to me. The other thing about the spacing, when you look at commercial spacing in a building, say, for example, our community hall, what is the square footage allowed per person? Did you happen to know that, Chief?
I don't know the actual numbers off the top of my head, but again, it all also depends on the use. So if you're serving food, if you're serving alcohol, is there fixed seating? Is there non-fixed seating? Is there tables? So those are all factors that we have to consider when determining the occupancy rating for a structure.
So to continue, thank you, Mayor. So we may have to then look at if you're renting a 3-bedroom that's 3,000 square foot private home that people are renting out versus 1,500 square foot cottage, it may be that on our initial inspection and assessments that we limit those properties on their license for a number. If you can accommodate 10 or 15 people for a luncheon or whatever, and it's a nice little party and quiet and they go home at 10, that would be great. But I'm not sure that we can have a one size fits all for property square footage. And I think that we're not going to settle all this tonight, but I think that should be some consideration on square footage of use. Also, back to the chief again, if I may, Mayor, I think that I know that the people in my neighborhood and most of the Wainfleet people that I know, if they're going to have a burn, they get a burn permit, they inform on that. I don't know how we're going to handle whatever we end up allowing for rental time, how we're going to handle all sorts of people burning every other week or 4 or 5 nights in a row, or how do we control that from safety and neighbors and sparks? And I mean, I suppose if we have owners, and I don't think we've addressed this yet, I am rambling, but if the owners have a rental agreement, then the people renting have to either inform us or have the owner inform us and alert us that they're going to do a burn that night or something. And we could very easily have somebody rent 10 weeks for five nights. We could have 50 fires going. I mean, it just gets to the point where the problem people will be the problem. And as one of my fellow counselors says, how do you control behavior? How do you legislate behavior? It's difficult. So you legislate behavior by rules and laws. I think before we settle out on this STR, we have to make sure that we have enough bylaw with enough teeth that the good people running good outfits don't come before us. And the people who are not running a proper rental, safe for themselves, their guests, and their neighbors, those people are subject to severe penalties and fines. Thank you.
Lindsay, I'm sorry, Miss Earl, can you please speak to the fire bylaw? Or-
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I'll jump in real quick. The licensing bylaw for short-term rentals, by all means, we currently have a fire bylaw in effect that regulates outdoor burning, which applies to all properties generally. The short-term licensing or short-term rentals bylaw that we're looking at tonight, as Lindsay has indicated earlier, has the ability to provide rules and regulations that are perhaps above and beyond what may be in place in other municipal bylaws. So for example, Councillor Anderson brought up the notion of number of bedrooms and the number of persons per bedroom. I know those numbers were contemplated at one point in the bylaw. The bylaw currently contemplates a certain limit based on its sort of our public process and the meetings we've held. And staff are looking from to council for some direction, its direction on where council wants to end up on this. Likewise, occupancy by non-resident or non-guest occupants. Yes, the fire department has codes which provide estimates and counts for the number of spaces and different types of occupancy limits. This bylaw has the opportunity to establish its own limitation about that on its own, separate and apart from what the fire code might provide. So if you as a council want staff to investigate and come back with a limitation to that regard, provide us that direction. We will do some research and we will try to come back to you with a proposed limitation in that regard. I know there were comments made about parking and on-site parking and restrictions regarding the number of spaces and where they can park, all that sort of stuff. I think Councillor McClellan brought up. Those are all items that our bylaw contemplates. And I guess staff are again coming to council saying, is what is being proposed strict enough for you? Is it too loose? We are seeking sort of council's direction so that we can come back and yes, somebody making application for a license will need to provide a site plan showing where all the on-site parking is going to be. It's going to identify all the possible cars that are permitted to be parked on the property. And the question is is that framework tight enough for council at this time? Or do you want to provide more additional direction? So again, hoping that helps clarify. You can do all the things you're asking for. Just tell us, direct us to provide that, undertake that research and come back to you with that, and we are prepared to do so.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to pick up on Councillor McClellan's concern and some of the others that have been shared. I don't think that we need to be shy about increasing the penalties. Our goal here, in my opinion, is to, one, protect the permanent residents, and then all the seasonal residents that don't cause any trouble, which is almost all of them, probably all of them. Basically, the problems are there's not very many problem sites, but we don't need to cater to those people. And so I think that as far as the demerit system, I don't want to see 5 times at 2 points to get to 10. I'd go 5 once and then you're at 10 at a minimum. And if there's precedent with Prince Edward County, as far as the penalties, why don't we start there? We don't need to start at a level that's a lot lower. They've been at it longer than we are, probably unfortunately for them. But again, our goal, at least from my opinion, our goal is to protect the permanent residents there. They're the ones that are suffering and not cater to people that are causing trouble. So I think we just ratchet it right up and not wait for another summer to ratchet it up. Like, let's just go right to the top.
Councilor McClellan.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. I'm happy you agree with that. I want to get this right the first time, and I don't want to hear about it anymore for the rest of my term. So I have a couple of things here, and this will go to the fire chief, if I may. Morgan, I've stayed in 2 places now in the last 6 days. Yeah, I've got my family with me, grandchildren, everybody. None of these places give you a fire route, number one. I know in Wainfleet, in the new build, you have to put in smoke detectors and fire alarms that are lighted so that you can find your way and see what's going on. I'd like to go one step further. I'd like to see them put in the battery packs that you put in a hotel or any commercial building, because you move into this place at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. God forbid there's a fire the first night you're in there. You won't even know how to get out of the building. We don't want that happening to anybody. It's not a big expense. That's something should go in. And fire extinguishers should go in. And they should, Morgan, if you have to send a firefighter out there to check them once a month, it's $100 bill for him to go. So be it. That's the cost of doing business. But we want to make sure these things are run and they're safe. not only for the neighbors next door that don't have to listen to the noise, but for the poor people that rent this place and come in there. And like I say, you're in a two-story house. You don't even, like, a kid will never figure out how to do it. It should be lit up. I'd go as far as to say we should have LED lights that are battery operated. You're doing business. You got to make it safe for the people that are renting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the provisions of the fire code that speak to emergency lighting, exit lighting, fire extinguishers, door operators, all of that. Residences are exempt from all of those provisions. So I can't use the fire code to enforce that, but we could include it in the bylaw. So again, if that's council's direction that they want those provisions included in the bylaw, then we look to council for that direction.
Go ahead, Councilman McClellan.
Yeah, so if I can continue. So Morgan, I get it. Our building bylaws are antiquated. They haven't caught up to what's going on. These short-term rentals have been going on slightly for years, but they've just exploded. And it's a problem all the way around the world. And it's going to take our building codes and all of that 10 years to catch up to what's happening. But I think the bylaw should include that. I think you should look at it very hard on how we do it to make those buildings safe. I also think our building official should go down and go through these buildings. If the hallways are too narrow and you can't easily get out of there, and some of those cottages they are, some of the stairwells are too narrow, some of the septic systems won't take the amount of people that are going in. That should all be determined. If somebody determines that the septic bed will only take 4 people living in the place, that's your rental, that's your limit, 4 people. Like, this is all stuff that we've got to, we're the only place that's not on a reserve in Ontario that's got a boil water advisory. And we're going to let them come in and just keep going, making it worse. Like, we got to use our brains.
Mr. Earl, can you speak to Councilor McClellan's comments regarding hallways and such?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And to the rest of council, under the application process and the renewal for the licenses, there will be site plans that are required to be submitted. There will be inspections by the bylaw officer and or the chief building official should they feel the need to have him come and complete his inspection. Same with fire, we'll be able to access not annually if necessary, but as needed. So yes, I agree that these properties do need to be safe and they do need to meet current building code. The septic systems typically are designed under the Ontario Building Code to allow for the current fixtures and living space that are already in the structures. So with the bylaw, we had contemplated changing, and this is the revised bylaw, that we did limit it to a maximum of 3 bedrooms. And we also limited it the number of people. So a 1-bedroom facility could have 4 people. A 2-bedroom could have 6, and a 3-bedroom would have a max of 8. I would look to council if they'd like to change those specific numbers because that's what's being proposed today.
Councilman McClellan?
Yeah, I would say a maximum of 2 people per bedroom. I think Councilor Anderson said that. Any house that has more than 3 bedrooms, the doors have to be padlocked closed for the additional ones. I think before a license is issued, they pay the expense of the chief building official and the fire chief to go through the building. That's part of above and beyond the cost of the application. And they have to have access and they have to be able to go through it. And if they come up with anything else, then it's everything gets reduced or changed or denied if it doesn't make their approval.
Councilor McClellan, would you like to make a motion on the floor regarding your fire comments?
Yeah, I'll put that forward as a motion. I think Meredith could probably word it a little better, but I definitely want to have that in as a motion.
I could a seconder.
I'm not clear what his motion is.
Okay, Councilor Gilmore.
So what?
And now any discussion? Councilor
We
Van,
don't know what his motion is.
Well, I,
Is it two people per bedroom?
Councilor McClellan, would you like to speak to your motion? Just explain it a little bit again.
Okay, so before you're issued a license, both the chief building official and the fire chief need to go through there. I think we definitely need to put in the battery operated lights to get you out of the building, just as any other commercial building has. Show where the exit, the thing will say exit, and light shining down the hallway so you can get out, so you know where you're going. And yes, it's an expense, but you're doing business, folks. You got to pay. Everybody else has to. And you can say it's a residence, but you're using it as a business now. So I'd also like to see that no more than 2 people. I think Councilor Anderson allowed for children under 5. I don't know if you want to make it children under 8, so 2 families can get together if they fit in there. That's fine. Pick a number, age, but I think no more than 2 per bedroom. And the other thing I'll throw out there, but I don't know if there's an appetite for it, but I'd like to put a limit for the number of days in a year you can rent it. Be it 90, 100, 120, so that it's there's some sense of normalcy in the neighborhood.
Councilor Van Fleet?
There was a lot happening in that motion, so I'm not really sure what we're gonna. You just want us to talk about everything he just talked about? 'Cause I'm not sure if I'm gonna agree with the maximum number.
Agree, Mr. Mayor, just
Yep.
to perhaps streamline this,
Okay,
maybe we do them one at a time.
okay.
So the first I heard was battery operated lights to exits, the emergency lighting. That was item 1 that was being proposed to be added as a requirement of every STR in Wainfleet. Perhaps if there's a sense from council, do you want staff to include that in the bylaw or not? I think we have it moved by Councillor McCullen, seconded by Councillor Gilmore, that there be a requirement STRs have emergency exit lighting. Perhaps that's the first item to deal with, get it off the plate.
Any discussion? Councilor Gilmore?
yeah, that's a good idea. And further to your comments, unless you 2 are better at taking copious notes than most professors, I think that we should probably go through every point that you want some clarity on now, and do exactly what you just said with everyone. It's going to take a little time, but otherwise, like, there's been a lot of talk going 29 directions here, and I hope you can retain it all, because I'm a little lost. So why don't we just go through it and go item by item that you want some clarity on, and we'll move on it. So anyway, that's a little off topic, but let's vote on the first one.
Any other discussion
The clerk should
on that?
read them, so we know exactly every one.
So the first one we're dealing with, if we could, is the battery operated.
Correct, yeah, I just
Excellent.
want to make sure that
Yep.
every time we're,
Yep. So that's the only one we're dealing with right now.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor?
Individual.
Recorded vote. So Councilor McCullen,
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet,
In favor.
in favor, Councilor Gilmore,
in favor.
Councilor Anderson.
In favor?
Okay, that is carried. Moving on, which one do you want to start with?
The next item I had on the list was fire extinguishers required in every STR.
Okay, any discussion on that?
I have a quick question for the.
Councilor
chief.
Van Fleet.
How many fire extinguishers do you need per house? I mean, I know I have 3 in my own.
So right now residences don't require portable fire extinguishers in the fire code.
Thanks.
Councilor McCullen?
So this is to the fire chief. What does a hotel or motel in town need with cooking arrangements?
I would have to look at the contents of the fire code to get back to you.
That would be great.
Counselor Anderson.
I just have a concern about fire extinguishers. I'm not sure that everyone knows how to operate one. I know that in my training in the hospital, we actually had training with fire department. I also worry that children of a certain age point things, pull triggers, and who knows who's going to get sprayed with foam. So I'm sort of worried about, I see it as a safety on one side and unsafe on another. So I think that warrants some discussion about whether we want to put something that could potentially be a weapon out to strangers who may or may not have the skill to handle it. That's my only concern.
Other comments or questions to it?
My only comment is I've had fire extinguishers in my house since I was a kid, and it was a hard no to touch it.
Through to my colleague, we have fire extinguishers in our house. Both of us were trained on them. My fear is untrained people and children. And I'm not sure about whether we have fire extinguishers in our personal properties is even germane to the discussion.
Okay, we still need a seconder on that motion. Anybody want to second it? Counselor Van Fleet? Any other discussion? Counselor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Perhaps the chief can review the pros and cons of that and either get back to us or communicate. I mean, I think you understand the sense of where we want to go and can work that out. On this one, I tend to lean towards parental responsibility, teaching kids not to do stuff, as Councillor Van Vliet alluded to, but I understand Councillor Anderson's concerns too. So maybe we should just hear back about that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this stage, perhaps it's direction to staff to report back with a recommendation regarding fire extinguishers in short-term rentals.
So move.
All right. Can I get a seconder on that then? You're going to move that? Counselor McClellan? Any other, yeah, anybody else want to have any discussion or anything? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, again, recorded vote. So we'll start with Counselor McClellan.
In favor.
Counselor Van Fleet.
In favor.
Counselor Gilmore.
In favor.
Counselor Anderson.
In favor?
In favor. Next up, Will.
The next note that I had just going through was the number of persons per bedroom and a cap at 3 bedrooms in a short-term rental. So I think what was proposed by Councillor McClellan was each short-term rental can have a maximum of 3 bedrooms with the maximum occupancy of 2 persons per bedroom. And then again, if there were children above and beyond that. So 2 persons per bedroom to a maximum of 3 bedrooms. If you have more than 3 bedrooms, I heard Councillor McClellan suggest that those were not able to be occupied. Hopefully I caught that right. And council's directions, thoughts, discussions on that.
You, Chair Tim Lindsay. I've only checked out the Prince Edward County. They call it an STA because it's short-term accommodation. And it's the tiny township, they were both very good. I'm sure you've looked at them. Where do they fall under? If it's 2 people per bedroom, that's 6, I'm assuming that's 6 adults. So how do you factor in children?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Counselor. The number of people that have been limited, we've looked at other local municipalities in Niagara and what's been working for them. So Fort Erie, for example, has revised their bylaw annually to accommodate for the issues and challenges that they've been facing. So that's where the 3-bedroom max has come from. The number of people, we originally were proposing a bit higher, or we weren't limiting it in the original draft bylaw that council has seen. These revisions where we essentially did 2 people per bedroom plus an additional 2. And that was to accommodate for those places that have lofts, bunk beds, pull-out couches, people who are gonna have friends and or children. And that a lot of those comments came back from the public at the time when we were doing public consultation. So that's why we had the 4, 6, and 8 people. So it was 2 per bedroom plus an additional 2 to accommodate for those. So if council wishes, we can still do the 2 adults per bedroom, limit it to 6 people for a 3-bedroom, with, not including children. So if that's council's direction, then staff are amenable to that.
I like that idea. Also, what about bunkies? Do they fall under bedroom or are they separate?
That's a good question, through you, Mr. Mayor. They would consider it as a bedroom. So it's a living space. So we would have to consider it as a full bedroom. So they would be part of the maximum. If it's the current owner that's going to be occupying it, then we can't regulate it. But if it's a short rental unit, then that may fall into the additional more than 3 bedrooms that will have to be locked off or gated off somehow.
I like the idea of 2 adults per bedroom. I don't know how we're going to cap out children because you can have as many children as you want. And if each couple brought 3 children, then but I don't think children and families are our problem. Those aren't the complaints we're getting. We're getting the party house complaints. Those are the people that we want to, stop all the complaints. Any suggestions?
I personally, I have a little bit of a struggle with the 3-bedroom cap. I know that in the majority of situations, it's probably a fantastic idea, but I do worry about some of those longstanding businesses that have been operating in the Lakeshore area that may have cottages that are, 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms that might still be zoned residential. And those are not the ones that are problems. They've been longstanding. They've been in operation way longer than I've even been alive, but we're going to be hurting them also by doing that. So I don't know if, we full on go 3 bedrooms, or if it's able to make an exception for some of those longstanding businesses that have been here forever. I don't know how that plays into it. Counselor Anderson or Counselor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, just on that point, there's no way to legislate common sense. And unfortunately, the common sense ship has sailed on this item for a long time. And the people that aren't the problem are going to get caught in the crossfire because we have to deal with a few people that are a problem, which has been part of life for a long time. And that's why I don't like even to have to do this, but there's no way around it at this point because we're too far down the road already. So it's just, people are just going to have to adjust. I don't know, because if we take the teeth out of it, then the rules are not going to be effective. We can tweak them after, but as I said earlier, I don't want to start too close to the lenient side. So I feel for the people that are caught in the crossfire, certainly, because they've done nothing wrong, but that's just unfortunately where we're at.
Counselor Anderson.
Through you, Mayor. Lindsay, could you clarify for me? And let's just do sort of synopsis. I own a larger property. I live in a principal residence home on that property. I have 3 or 4 cottages. All of them will accommodate 3 bedrooms. So let's say 3 cottages, 9 bedrooms. 2 adults per bedroom. We do the math. How do we ensure that those standing businesses can still call each cottage a unit. Would you clarify that for me? Because I don't want to stop standing businesses from carrying forward.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Anderson. That was one of the comments that was brought up earlier through Mr. Mayor about the existing commercial properties. So if the property is designated commercially as tourism, resort commercial, and they have that designation, they are not subject to licensing bylaw. If they are designated residential, then each unit would have to have a license. And then that each unit would be a max of 3. It would be an annual license renewal as well for each unit. Because there are a number of properties that have multiple units, as you've indicated.
So through you, Mayor, what you're saying to me is if I have 4 cottages and I'm living on the property, I will be paying 4 unit or 4 times our fee.
Correct.
Is there any way that those folks would see some relief if in fact they re-identified themselves as a summer resort area, got a license, then they fall out of our bylaw restrictions, correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct. So every landowner has the opportunity to change the designation of their property through the Planning Act, which is a public process. So they would have to come in for a rezoning application. Part of that would be a pre-consultation meeting with all interested parties and commenting agencies to determine what their current designation is, what they're proposing, what requirements there would be. So they could go through a proper process to designate those properties as commercial or tourism, resort to tourism, or something that's more like-natured or appropriate for that property. And actually, staff would encourage those properties that have been longstanding with either legal non-conforming status to bring that up to standard today.
So through you, Mayor, again, so they would go through the process of rezoning. It's a fee, but it secures their income going forward. Because we have property owners and sites out here that have been running multi-cottage areas for 40, 50 years. And I don't believe those people have been an issue. I think that what some of the issue has grown to be is sort of the investment owner. I mean, we all invest in our properties, but you know, I'm not shy to say that properties are being bought in Wainfleet that are just straight investment deals. They're buying a property, they're cramming as many people into it as they can for the whole summer and every other day, and it's just a moneymaker. And just to go back to, just for some enlightenment for the gallery, the daily income in Prince Edward County for short stay limits, daily, those short stay limits units brought in $138,000 a day rent. Now, we're not going to run that kind of numbers, but it is a business. These people are running rental, stay businesses. They may not ever even sleep a day in the house unless they're coming to clean it up. So there is a big difference in my mind between long-term business cottage people that have rented out here versus this whole new wave of investors buying properties for the sheer point and effort of making money. And I think we have to protect one of those, and I think we have to sort of guard rail the other. However we get to that, folks.
Councilor McClellan.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. To Mrs. Earl, I guess the question would be, and I understand I've had a conversation with a few of these people that have been running long-term, no complaints. I never even knew they were existent till I spoke to them. They may already be designated as tourist residential, I think you call it, and that's fine. But my question is, so we put in large fines and we do all this. What is the likelihood that, as Councilor Anderson said, an investor that's just here, he'll never sleep in a place, he'll like, so what's the likelihood of them getting the zoning changed amongst a residential neighborhood, and then we lose control again. You know, I'd probably like to hear Sarah's answer on that, because to me, that's just defeat the whole purpose of what we're doing tonight. And we have been doing over the last while trying to get this done. You know, is there a way to say that if you zone that now, or if you've been operating, you know, for 10 years prior to this, you get grandfathered in for some of these places? I don't know. And then my other question is, that's great. John McCullen's been running one for 10 years, hasn't had a problem, gets grandfathered in. I get older and I sell the place. I think the new owner should have to buy, so they're grandfathered to the sale of the property. And then it all has to go back and play the game fairly. Like, I get it. I don't want to bring undue burden to the good guys, and they shouldn't get caught in the crossfires, but somebody explain to me how to do that without us being called that we're discriminating against somebody.
Ms. Earl.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McClellan's comments. The first question was the likelihood of zoning changes. Previous staff reports had reviewed requirements for zoning and official plan changes overall for the entire municipality, and that's not something that council was interested in at the time. If we were asking, and then I think you mentioned two different types of business. So one would be a business that has multiple units on the site already and that's operating, versus a single family home that you're considering as a business. So I just wanted to make sure that the clarity was between the two different types. So if somebody was to come in for a rezoning application, as I mentioned, under the Planning Act, council has that authority to determine if they're going to support those types of zoning applications or not. We would require some sort of justification as to why they need to have that commercial type designation or the resort tourism designation, and it would be up to council's discretion if that's something that you are willing to entertain. Obviously, the first one or two applications you get are going to set a huge precedence for the township. The other section you were discussing was, you know, the ones that don't stay at the hotels, or at the, we call ghost hotels, and they're not occupied by the owner ever. So that is the challenge that council's been faced with. And how are you determining whether you're licensing them or not? So I leave it to council.
Councillor Van Fleet.
Through you, Chair, to Lindsay, how many days are we doing STRs?
Through the mayor. So the previous short-term rental, the draft bylaw had 180 days as a max limit. Some of the comments that came back were that's going to be too difficult to enforce. A lot of the public didn't want to be restricted to how many days they could rent. And I don't disagree with it. So that was removed from this bylaw. So the number of days for operating was removed.
Okay, and if I could, I know we had talked about this previous, I don't remember when, but we had talked about a contact, who we contact, and how many minutes it's going to take that person to get there. I'm not sure if we read that in here, or did I just miss it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that was also addressed. Originally, it was a 2-hour time frame that was kept in. And so the operator shall have an agent who's responsible or a local contact person who is available to respond. So should there be issues, noise complaints, etc., bylaw comes out, we have to have somebody available to come. And I mean, these are renters, right? So we can tell them through enforcement what the requirements are, but if they're not listening to us, it's going to be up to the leasee, I guess, the owner of the rental unit to make sure that who they're renting to is following proper procedures.
It still stands at 2 hours.
Still stands at 2 hours. We also included it has to be a local contact person.
Okay, because the ones that we have problem with, 2 hours could be a long time for things to get totally out of hand. Wondering if we should maybe shorten that. I know ones that I've read, they're within 30 minutes and some are 15 minutes. So I don't know what everyone else is thinking. I think like 30 minutes is good before things are gonna get totally out of hand. And probably faster than, you know, the police could get there.
All right. We can add that as another motion. Okay. Any other discussion on this current motion that's on the floor? Can I get a seconder on it then? Since yeah, on the motion that's on the floor.
And for clarification, the motion that's on the floor is 2 persons, maximum of 3 bedrooms, plus children.
So can I get a seconder? Counselor Gilmore. Any other further? Oh, Counselor McClellan?
Yeah, I think I put the motion up, so I don't think I can second it, right?
Yes, you did. Any
Sorry about
further? Okay, all right. So we'll just go to the recorded vote. Counselor McClellan, you just stated you're in favor.
Favor.
Counselor Van Fleet, Counselor Gilmore,
Favor.
Counselor Anderson,
In favor?
in favor, and that is carried. Moving on.
The next motion I had, or the next item I had for note pertain to persons, let me see, other than occupants attending the property. And I know there was questions asked of the fire chief about what capacity limits certain buildings or structures or uses had. There was some discussion amongst members of council earlier as to non-occupants who were sort of visiting during the course of the day or during the course of the evening. Again, the last question I'll have on that is currently it says 11 o'clock, whether you wanted to move it to 10, but the question was whether you wanted a limit on the number of non-occupant visitors to the site. This is outside of the 2 per bedroom plus kids. Whether you wanted to limit that or give direction to staff to come up with a formula based on, a building size or lot size or parking or anything along those lines. So was there any direction to staff in that regard? Non-occupant visitors, number, quantity of.
Counselor McClellan?
Yeah, so if we're at 6 adults here, if we put another 6 adults on it, and they've got to be gone by 10 o'clock, then no, maybe it's 9 o'clock. I don't know. Let's figure it out. What it is, but yeah, I get it. You know, somebody wants to, they're up there and they're having a birthday party or they're having a barbecue but you know, at some point you got to pull the plug so the noise dies. Because if you say 9, it'll be 10. If you say 10, it'll be 11 before they leave. So pick the number, guys.
Counselor Van Fleet?
Your chair, I wasn't talking about time right now, but I will. Shouldn't it go by parking spots? Maximum number of people, because that makes sense, right? Because we get a lot of complaints about a certain area where everybody's parking all over the place. So if the bylaw goes, you have 4 parking spots, then you can only have whatever, 8 adults, 10, however you can fit in a car. That's a bad question because you can fit a lot of people in a car. But I'm more along the lines of 9 PM cap. As Councilor McCullen just said, if you say 9, they might be out by 10. And those people who are complaining need some relief.
Any other comments? Counselor Anderson?
I agree with Sherry in the sense that 9 o'clock is probably a good hour. Part of what we're looking here for is neighbors. And so if you're a permanent resident and your grandchildren are here and stuff, you probably don't want them disturbed until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So it's like how do we get to a good neighbor policy? The people that are going to be good tenants and renters will be good tenants and renters. But what do you do about the people who won't? That's the problem. It's the people who won't sort of stick to the rules. So know, if I had my grandchildren at the house, I don't want them up till 11 o'clock at night because the people next door just can't get control of the situation. So I'm willing to go at 9 o'clock if we vote on that, or certainly not much later than that.
Other questions or comments? Counselor Gilmore, go ahead.
We haven't, I'm all for the 9 o'clock part. We haven't settled on the number of people. So we got to pick a number. So if you have 6 adults, you want to allow 6 additional guests until 9 o'clock, I could live with that.
My only concern is the parking, because we do get a lot of complaints about the parking. I don't know how we cap that number.
Well, we can say up to 6, conditional on the appropriate parking spots.
That work? Ms. Earl, you were going to
That
speak
work.
to that? Does that work?
Mayor, yeah, part of the submission requirements is the site plan that has to show what you have available for parking has to be identified. And you have to be in accordance with the township's parking bylaw as well. So we don't want the parking on the road, we want the parking contained on site. So if you only have spot for 1 or 2 cars, you're not going to get, 25 people visiting the site, for example. So I think the last motion we just heard, subject to available parking, is a really good idea, and then we can amend the bylaw accordingly for you.
Well, we want to just get a second on that then, as it is. Counselor Gilmore? Okay, we'll do it in 2 parts. So you want to just say which is which first?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess the first part is the number of additional guests, which I'm hearing is 6 persons subject to available parking.
All right, so we'll just go with the recorded vote. Counselor McCollum,
In favor.
Counselor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Counselor Gilmore,
Favor.
Counselor Anderson.
In favor?
In favor. And that is carried. So next up,
Next up is the hours. Again, the current bylaw draft includes 11 PM as being the sort of cutoff time for those additional guests. There's been discussion of both 10 and I believe 9 as the most recent. So if there's a movement, some motion from council.
want to just put the motion for 9 PM then? Yep. So mover or seconder, I'll put the motion, you can be the seconder, that's
Sure.
fine. Any other discussion? Not, we'll go to the recorded vote. Counselor McCollum,
In favor.
Counselor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Counselor Gilmore,
Favor.
Counselor Anderson,
In favor?
and in favor, and that's carried.
Mr. Mayor, the next one I had was the response time for the local contact. Currently, the bylaw, I believe, proposes a 2-hour response time. That has been proposed to be amended to 30 minutes. I think that was moved by Councillor Van Vliet. If there's a seconder for that, or if there's further discussion.
Counselor Gilmore, you'll second that. Any other discussion on it? No? Okay, then we'll go to the recorded vote. Counselor McCollum,
In favor.
Counselor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Counselor Gilmore,
Favor.
and Counselor Anderson,
In favor?
in favor. And that's carried.
Mr. Mayor, through you to council, one thing that was discussed but wasn't really put on record one way or the other were concerns raised regarding open air burning at short-term rentals. Again, we do have an open air burning bylaw that regulates properties generally, but as has been noted from the outset, if council wishes to go above and beyond, they do have an opportunity with the short-term rental bylaw to go above and beyond. So if, for example, you wanted to further restrict open air burning at licensed short-term rentals, you do have the option to do so. Again, I don't know whether there's any appetite or direction from council in that regard.
Counselor McClellan?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if the fire chief would recommend a certain size fire pit not to exceed, A fire height that's not to exceed. I know it's all things that are there, but that are going to be tough to do. But what's your recommendation? You're the guy that's going to have to run out there and put out the fire, right? And or go out there and hose it down because it's too large. So is there a fire pit size that you believe is fair, or should we just have none and be done with it? And do you buy a license as the operator that's allowed for the household then? And do they have to call you in like I do to tell you I'm having a fire? Like, where do we go with this, chief? I know I'm throwing a lot on you and you probably didn't have much time, but you're the expert, right?
No, that's okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our open air bylaw does have provisions for recreational or campfires. That limit is already set to 1 meter wide by 1 meter tall, and it has to be in a enclosed pit that has to be from, combustible materials. It has to be on non-combustible footings. It has to be, away from these things. And there's also timelines where they're permitted to go from between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. One thing I would recommend if timing and neighborly is a concern, is maybe similar to, certain campgrounds, having your fire extinguished by a certain time, 11:10, 11 o'clock, whatever council would see fit. That would be in addition to the open air bylaw that we have existing. But certainly I could take a look at our bylaw and see how it may apply and if there's any additions that we could add to it.
Any other comments or questions to that? I'll put it on the floor then. I would say that we should go with a restricted time and say call it from 7 to 11 or 7 to 12, depending on what my colleagues feels better suited. Any other comment to that?
Like 7
Councilor Van-
a.m.?
No, 7 p.m. to either 12 p.m. or 11 p.m., depending on how restricted we want to get. Seven to 11, that's in conjunction with noise, right? You have to be quiet after 11 o'clock. Councilor McCollum?
Yeah, so I think we changed noise down to 10 o'clock, didn't we? On the rental properties. And, we're asking people to leave by 9. So maybe the fire goes out by 9:30 or something like that. And it's somewhere in between. And, if the fire's out, hopefully your guests are getting in the car and leaving at this by then anyway, right? So.
I could.
Go ahead, Councilor Van Fleet.
I get where you're coming from, John, but I just think the people who are actually renting might want to enjoy a quiet fire by themselves with their children. I get we're trying to get rid of the bad actors, but I don't want to punish the good people who are just sitting around having a campfire, listening to music, roasting hot dogs, doing whatever. So this is where we really have to find a happy medium. I don't like having fires during the day at all. I think that people can't open their windows or do any of that. But I also want people to enjoy whatever it is they're doing outside. So I don't have a good number either.
Velka, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Van Vliet. So our open air bylaw for recreational fires do not permit fires during the day. So it has to be from 7 p.m. on. I would remind council that, during short-term rentals, especially in the summer season, we do have the summer solstice. So, quite often it's not dark until 9:30. So, to have a campfire that has to be put out before it's even dark may be limiting to some of those who want to enjoy a campfire.
Councilor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I tend to agree with the chief. We're doing a lot of micromanaging here, and I think this one we need to leave alone. And we've got a solid fire bylaw already. We've been down this road with it before. Let's just leave this one alone.
Okay. I'll just strike that. Okay. What's up next, Bill?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we talked about the 30-minute response time from the local person. So the last item that I had on the list that was being discussed earlier today was the maximum number of days of operation. I know the manager of community and development services explained the rationale for removing that from the bylaw at this time, but I know it was mentioned nonetheless. So that's really the last one that I had in my list of things to be discussed if there was any change or direction in that regard. And hopefully Lindsay can speak to any sort of comments that might arise out of that.
Anybody have any comments about that? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think that we've got the bad people on the run, and maybe we should just see how this goes. I tend to agree with Ms. Earl that maybe that should come out, and we'll certainly be revisiting this, but I tend to agree that it should come out.
Councillor Van Fleet, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. To Lindsay, did we talk monetary value or did we table it? Like, there was two different numbers set that we were going to revisit for penalties. Did we land on one?
Through you, penalties is next. I thought we were going to finish the sort of functional elements and then we come back to penalties at the very end.
Councillor McClellan, go ahead.
Yeah, so before we go into the fines for non-licensed, all of these that we just asked them to look at, this list we just voted on, they all have to have teeth that are gonna hurt. It's not a $50 fine, Lindsay. It's a $500 fine if you're over, because $50 they'll just pay it. And we'll have, so you got to put teeth in all of this. And, you know, so the operator has to have this list with the list of fines on it to the people. Because when you rent one of these, you give your charge card and it's open. And if you violate these, and we're going to try and find the homeowner, he's going to say, well, I got no way to get my money back. So that's, again, where, you know, other places are saying you need noise monitors and you need video cameras so that, you know, and it's a business. This is what you have to do to be in this business. So, you know, and you have to have teeth, and then the guy can he knows he's going to pay the fine. So he's going to get it out of the guy that's doing it. So there's consequences. That's the only way anybody stops doing anything, is they know it's going to cost them money.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, just to point out that there are no fines of $50. The lowest fine that's in there is a $500 fine, and that is for permitting non-occupying guests to attend after. In this case, it still says 11 o'clock, but I think we've just changed that to 9 p.m. So that's a $500 fine, which is the lowest fine on the page. From there are several $750 fines. Then we move into $1,000 fines. Then we move into $1,500 fines for initial violations, with $2,000 in subsequent violations. So nothing less than $500 is in the current bylaw proposed. But that is the number, that's sort of where we're at now. And I know there was some discussion regarding the operation of a rental without a valid license. The $1,500 first offense, $2,000 for second and subsequent offenses. I think council, I heard referring to Prince Edward County as perhaps being a more appropriate benchmark. And I guess the only suggestion I would make to perhaps expedite discussions is that perhaps council direct staff to start with our bylaw penalty amounts that are being proposed, do a review of those proposed amounts versus Prince Edward, and we will make the necessary adjustments and perhaps come back to you for your consideration at the next meeting, keeping in mind the principles that the manager of community and development services noted regarding the punitive nature of fines and being completely aware of the sort of broader framework that we're working in. But if that's direction that council wants to give us, go away, look at Prince Edward, make necessary modifications, and come back. We're prepared to do so, or we're also prepared to take explicit direction on a case-by-case basis, starting on page 30 of 110 of your agenda package, where the fines currently sit.
Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. That was exactly where I was going to suggest that we go as far as the fines go. Just, I think you certainly have heard the tenor of our concerns, and I would just like to see you go through that, bring those numbers back, stiffened up, and because when we start picking numbers, we'll all have a different number. So I think that's a good idea. The only other thing I'd like to just make a comment on is the aspect of enforcement. You reference another staff person, and I'm wondering whether this is something that should be contracted out rather than taking on another administrative person to deal with this. So have you considered that? And I think that we need to flesh that idea out a little bit, either now or at the very next opportunity, unless you have some comments about the aspect of contracting out the enforcement side.
Shirley, you have any comments on that?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, contracting out the role of the position. So licensing short-term rentals in Wainfleet, we expect to have anywhere between 100 to 200 units rented at any time. The risk with licensing is that we don't know how many people are going to apply for the license once we start the initial pilot program. It's very likely that we will have those that want to do good and they know about the program and they come in and apply. That may be 20 people, maybe 50 people, it could be 7 people. We don't know. The flip side of this role is not just administration, it's the enforcement side. So Councillor Gilmore is right that it's going to be enforcement based likely. And what I'm hearing tonight with the increase in fines, and we have to take a look at the increased demerit points and really put some teeth to this bylaw, is that council really wants to crack down on the ones that are being kind of the bad eggs, is what we're hearing. So we haven't put thought out as it being a contract person, mainly because in the bylaw enforcement side of things, there's other bylaws that the municipality owns that will also have to be enforced as part of this bylaw. So what we envision is this being another bylaw enforcement official who has the right under provincial offenses to regulate and enforce these types of bylaws. So not just the licensing bylaw, but other bylaws like the noise bylaw, fireworks, etc. So I think that was important. But that's why we're also talking about it now, is if hiring an additional full-time employee, obviously if this is what council wishes, has to be accommodated for in the operational budget considerations that you're going to see next week.
Could this be a shared service with Port Colborne?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's something that we can talk to the city about. It's my understanding right now, they do not license short-term rentals in the city. They are looking at it as well. They do have a registry type list of on a volunteer basis. So
Okay.
they don't pick up all of the rental units.
Okay, so if we had to hire somebody, could it be like a student that we already hire?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Problems with that are that there is risk associated with having a student issuing penalty fines of $10,000. I'd be concerned for the student's safety. I'd be concerned that that student hasn't had the experience or exposure in enforcement type things that are of this nature, high value type enforcement. So the contract also is concerning where we want to have somebody who has that level of experience to help guide the township through that enforcement and administration of this program.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
McClellan?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is all the more reason to limit the number of days of the rental, because then we can put it out as a contract, sub it out, get the third party in there, let them take care of it. We know what the cost is, and the licensing fee, this shouldn't be coming in under our operating budget. The licensing fee should cover whoever we hire. That's why we're licensing. We don't want this expense. Why should a regular homeowner pay for this? This should be like the building department. pays its own bills. And that's how it should happen with this. If our licensing fees, you said there's 100 to 200, if you think are going to be operating in town, if they all have to be licensed and we're charging $1,000, that's $200,000 we have to administer this. Sub it out. And after 4 months, the contract's up and we'll get you back next year. I think Mr. Gilmore is absolutely right on this.
Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I get, yeah, my point, I think, is when you say the word contract, you can give a person to come here on a specific contract. What I don't want to have happen is we take on another staff and then this problem, a lot of the bad people go away and then we have this person. And then we have to figure out what are we going to do with this person? And if you let them go, there's cost to that. So I think at least for the first year, if we're going to bring a person on, it's a finite time that they're employed until we see where this is going, because at the moment, we're going to hire the person not knowing what the revenue is going to be. And I think I believe your intention is that it does operate like the building department. It's user pay, but it's not user pay in the first year because the costs are front loaded. So I'd rather just make sure that we're limited, our expense exposure is limited until we see where this is going and where it lands in the end. So there's a lot of moving parts to this side, but hiring another FTE and then, just, well, what do we do with them now? I don't want to go there. So I get your point on the enforcement side, as long as our bylaw guy can carry the load. But there's two parts to it. There's the enforcement and there's the administration on the registration side, but I didn't hear you say that one person is going to handle both.
For you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. One person will be fully responsible for the administration of the licensing program. So right from intake of the applications, review, setting up the inspections, circulating it internally for comment, and then issuing the licenses. Then follow up with all enforcement related matters. We will likely have to upgrade our website, have complaint kind of based submission forms, and that's those types of things will have to be implemented, all done by one person.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and building on that, the actual manner in which that individual person is employed, as in via a contract, via a permanent position, via a, whatever. I don't think we need to get into those details right now. I think at this stage, what we're saying is there is definitely going to need to be a body. And we should be prepared, at least in the first year, until we know if we have broad acceptance and agreement from the operating community that they are going to comply versus outright objections to the bylaw and people attempting to avoid its implementation. Until we get a better feel for that, which again will likely not be for another year out, that is where the concern that staff have about potentially not seeing 100% cost recovery in the first year. Although, again, as has been outlined from the outset, it is ultimately the goal or the hope that this will be cost recovery and will have zero impact on the tax levy in a negative way. The trick is, until we get this process up and running, until we get this trial effort underway, we just simply do not know the degree to which we are going to have voluntary compliance from the outset.
Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. Lindsay, could you clarify for me, is there any prospect of running this as a sort of a pilot program. And the person that we hire to sort of source all of the who's renting, who isn't renting, who's legal, who's non-conforming, that would, as Counselor Gilmore suggests, be a contract, like a term contract within a pilot description program so that we're not locked into a full-time equivalent staff. And then when we know the number of the units, we would have a better eye on the cost recovery of that. I think if people read the local newspaper, Port Colborne put out the suggestion that they would like, they know they have short stay units there, and they asked the owners to come forward and to at least admit that they're doing the business. And of the 18, which isn't very many, they only had 2 people compliant. So two people out of 18 stepped up and said, yeah, I'm doing that. Okay, I'll come in on your whatever program you do. So right away, that tells me that compliance or admitting to securing a business unattended to any bylaws, guidelines, or income sort of reverence is just not going to happen. Like, people don't like to admit how they're, where their under the table money is coming from. So I'd like to see it, if that works in an administrative sense, pilot program, we do a contract individual, we see our numbers, and most of these rentals will probably be in the Lakeshore area. And so there bears the burden, as they have anyway. There's lots of study that says when you get to certain percentages of short stay rental properties, that your community changes, that your neighborhood changes. And there's a lot of reference to that. So we may down the road have to limit, as have some of the research I've done, some of the counties that had 500 and 600 short stay units. They've just said that's enough. We can't handle it. It's too much work. Most of them are non-compliant. It's a big pain. And so they just said, we're not going to do 800 short stay licenses. We're going to do 300. So I think we need to be aware of supersaturating the lakeshore. And I don't know what the percentage number there is, where it becomes something that interferes with what is at this point a fairly reasonably stable permanent residential group of people. But I, for one, don't want to see it turn into a tourist area.
Cyril, do you have any comments on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do just have a couple quick comments. The first comment to Councillor Anderson's inquiry about the contract or a pilot program. Staff do see this as the first or maybe even 2 years is going to be a pilot program, and that there will likely be amendments needed through lessons learned, through implementing a new licensing bylaw. Luckily, we've seen some other local municipalities go through this, and we can use some of their learned issues and address them that way. So to answer your question, some of the other municipalities like Fort Erie, for example, also do limit the number of licenses that are issued annually. For example, Fort Erie does 200. So that's something that council can consider now or in the future. Staff is also concerned with a contract person, given the nature of the environment for hiring right now, not just in bylaw enforcement, but in all professions, is that hiring a contract person may not necessarily give us the best options for somebody who would only be looking for contract work. That's something to keep in mind.
Councilor McCollum?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So in my, an easy, however we hire somebody, that's down the road, and we'll figure that when we get to that. The biggest thing is getting this bylaw done. So we know we're going to charge a fee. The fee should cover whoever it is. And we worry, they talk about we might only have 10 compliant. There's a simple way. We're going to give out 200 licenses. First come, first serve. After that, we're done. And the only way it'll be is if somebody gives up their license or loses it, we're going to give it away to the next guy. You'll have everybody in the room signing up the first week you do it, because they all talk to each other. They all know who's doing what, and they'll be rushing in the door because they don't want to lose the chance to make money. This is a business for them. They'll all run down and fill you up.
Is that a motion on the floor, Councilor McCollum? Would you like to make that a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I think it'll be there. We put a limit. I heard tonight somewhere between 100 and 200 is what we think. Maybe somebody goes online and checks, Vibro, Airbnb, Facebook rentals, and figure out what it's going to be and squeeze it down a little bit so they all come forward.
So do you have a direct number that you want to call on the motion, or do you just want to direct staff at this time to review that and come back to us?
I think I would direct staff to come back to us with it, but go through the different platforms, figure out how many there are and set it at that, and they'll come running.
Is there a seconder on that? Councilor Gilmore? Any further discussion? Okay, then we'll do the recorded vote. Councilor McCollum?
In favor.
So sorry. Hold on, we got Mr. Earl wants to speak to it before we go.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, that 100 to 200 units, that was already done through staff's review previous when the very first report came back in 2021. So we can't guarantee if we did a search tomorrow that we're going to get 100 to 200 units listed as rental units. One, it's off season, and two, some people don't always advertise. So I think if you wanted to set a specific limit, you might have a better outcome as to getting people out and applying. I can't guarantee you that that number is going to change between 100 to 200. I understand that it's a broad range, but I think there was some studies done that were looking at that previous.
Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Well, in light of those comments, I mean, to me, 100 is plenty, more than enough, really. A lot more than we need. But we can pick the number and then adjust it if there's this great demand. But I don't want to encourage this great demand. I mean, that just encourages the problem.
I could,
Councilor McClellan?
sorry.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I tend to agree with Councilor Gilmore. We pick a number, call it 150. If you don't get in this year, you have to wait till next year because we only accept your licenses application in January. And it's a year by year thing. We accept you in January. So if you don't get in, you think you're going to beat it or you're going to skirt your way around it. Like I say, these guys are in business. If you own a business and there's a bylaw comes out and it gives you X number of days to get something done, you're going to get it done. If they give you 3 months or 4 months, you're going to get it done. This bylaw isn't even done tonight. This might not come back to us for another month, but hopefully it'll be at the next one and it'll be right. And we can say, yeah, let's hammer down on this. But I doubt that'll happen. I think it'll go longer than that. We'll get a bunch of complaints. We'll get a bunch of people saying, yeah, you didn't go hard enough. And we'll figure it out from there again. But I honestly believe pick a number and that's it for the 2023 season. And if you're not in it and you get caught and the fine is $5,000, you pay the fine and that's it. And you can't rent any more that year because the next time it's going to cost you 10.
Councilor Van Vliet?
Through you, Chair. My only concern with putting a cap on the number right now is people have already paid for this upcoming season. They've already paid Airbnb, VRBO, or the individual cottage owners themselves. So again, I don't want to punish the people who are doing good, who we don't hear a single complaint about. We just want to go after the bad people. And those are the people who are going to come in and get the license right away. Or is the bad people because they don't want to have to keep paying and paying and paying. But I think if we cap it at I think 200 actually is a good number this year because people have already, like I said, they've already paid for a lot of these people pay as they're leaving that week. It's generational people. But go ahead, John, you're going to argue with me.
No, I'm not going to. I'm going to add to that. I agree with you. This license won't come into effect till 2024. This year's already a wash. So what we're doing now is going to affect 2024. And that's where we have, you give them the 90 days or 180 days to get in. And if they're not in, then we have a limit for next year. And everybody will know it. So they won't be accepting cash for people, and people can make arrangements to go somewhere else if they don't plan on putting it in.
Counselor Anderson.
I'm just gonna make one comment and then a suggestion. 100 seems like a lot to me. I mean, if you live here, you know the problems on the lake shore. There's 1,000 houses. So if you let 100 people do rental, you know, that's 1 every 10 houses. The problem is that isn't how it happens. What happens is you get density of short stay units. That's what the problem is when you research all the other communities. Maybe where I live, we're all permanent residents, nobody will be a rental. But you'll get down into another neighborhood with recent sales of homes and properties, and they'll all be short stay rental. And so now you have a tourist zone. That's just the description. So we can't control that. You know, I'm with, you know, Councillor Gilmore. I think 100 is an upper limit. That's 10% of the population of the housing units on the lakeshore. And further to that, I think what we should do is probably move the discussion through, possibly pick this up at another meeting. I'm not sure that anything else is much going to come to fruition here.
No other further comments or questions then? Do we, Councilor McCullen, you still have the motion on the floor. Did you want to set a number, or do we just want to come back with staff and revisit it?
I tend to agree when you put it that way. You know, 100 is 10% of the lakeshore population. I'm not sure if that might be the right number that's there. I guess the question is, if they're already doing them and there's 110 or 120, what do we do with the ones that are over now, that are in existence?
Anybody have any comment? Councilor Gilmore's got a comment for that.
Well, let's just let it run its course here and see who comes in. This is like any other bylaw. We can change it at any time that either we see fit or staff says you need to change this. So that nothing's changed there. And I agree with Councilor Anderson. We've spent almost 2 hours on this, and a lot of people are waiting to take up the other item of business. And so I think you've got lots to work on, and bring it back, and we may have to tweak it one more time. And this is for not this year anyway, regrettably. So we have time, but we have to get it right. I think we're well on our way, and I think it's just time to move off this for now.
Councilor McCullen, you had the motion on the floor. Do you agree with that? You rescind the motion then, and we'll just.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other further discussion or comments? No? Okay, then I'll have a motion on the floor that the Community and Development Services Staff Report CDS 001-2023 be received, and that the draft short-term rental licensing bylaw appended to this report as amended be presented to council for adoption at the next meeting. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor Gilmore, Councilor Anderson. Any other discussion? If not, we'll go to the recorded vote. Councilor McCullen?
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet?
In favor.
Councilor Anderson?
Favor?
In favor.
And I'll vote in
Councilor
favor
Gilmore.
too.
Sorry, I missed, yeah. It's been a long night already.
Mayor, before we move on to the next item, let's take a 5-minute recess.
All right, let's do that.
Here's the problem. That's why I asked the fire. I won't sit. And we went back and
All right, guys, we're gonna get started again. Okay, we're gonna move on to PSR 001-2023. The draft plan of subdivision file P02/20121. Zoning bylaw amendment for file numbers Z06-2021W 2709998 Ontario Inc. Land Pro Planning Solutions. Ms. Earl, would you like to give us a brief overview of this report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the rest of council. This report provides a review of the applicable planning policies as it relates to the applications for a draft plan of subdivision and concurrent zoning bylaw amendment for the subject property located at Concession 4, Part Lot 32, fronting on the south side of Highway 3 and the west side of Pettit Road in the hamlet of Winger. The draft plan of subdivision seeks approval for the creation of 15 single lots on private services, 1 block for the existing municipal drain, 2 blocks for the stormwater management, 1 block for water for firefighting purposes, and 2 public roads. The zoning bylaw amendment applications seeks approval to rezone the subject property from a development D and hazard H zone to a residential R1 358 and hazard zone, to permit single detached dwellings, some with reduced lot frontages, and to protect the water course traversing the subject property. A number of technical studies and reports were submitted in support of the applications. These studies and reports have been reviewed and informed the analysis contained within the staff report, as well as the comments provided by internal departments, utility providers, and other commenting agencies. The statutory public meeting regarding the applications was held in May of 2022 to provide information to the public and council regarding the applications. Summary of the comments are found in the report along with the required conditions of draft approval. Should council wish to approve the draft plan of subdivision, the conditions listed in Appendix C of the report must be fulfilled within 3 years prior to council granting final approval of the subdivision. It's staff's opinion that the applications remain consistent with local, regional, and provincial planning policies and recommend that the applications be approved subject to the draft plan conditions in Appendix C. I'm available for questions at this time.
Councilor Van Fleet.
You, Chair. Actually have 3 points that have been emailed to me. So the first one, Lindsay, is in lieu of cash, in lieu of parkland, what is 5% of cash going to be? We know that total?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do not have the total right now. The 5% for cash in lieu is calculated before the day of the building permit issuance. So the value of land at that time.
Okay, because that area will not have a park at all once Winger School closes. So I'm just wondering if staff knew that there's no park over there once the school's gone.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's been brought up a couple of times. So right now, Winger School is owned by the school board and not the township. So that's not a municipal park per se. So when we are looking at subdivision development, parks and parkland dedication is always considered. Most likely parkland's not considered in each specific subdivision because of the size of the required parks. So it's not general practice to put a park in each subdivision. So what we would like to do as a municipality or corporation is to obtain the parkland dedication so that we can fund future projects. Right now, we have a draft rec master plan for parks and rec, but that's done back in 2011 and not in effect at this time. So that's something that staff is working towards, and that's on our list for work projects that council will see coming up in the future. But right now, this subdivision was not identified as a location for a park. So that is good information to know. We have noted it, and we will be working with the school boards as well when they close the schools to see what options are available from the township at that time.
Okay, the next question, this is all from an email from a resident who lives right there. The resident wanted to know if they could gain clarification to the definition of accessing to ensure it to include both, like, as far as the lighting impact goes. So it's condition 14. So they want to make sure that they're going to know what's going to happen. Because where this person's house is situated, they're going to be getting headlights coming out all the time, right into their living room. They want to see if they can have a look at that plan before it's implemented. And the third one was the photometric plan, landscape plan, added so as the development property will have a direct negative effect on the existing residents. So they want to know, like, just to mitigate light pollution, they're huge on the light pollution. And what is going to happen to Pettit Road? Because Pettit Road's not a great road, as any road in Wainfleet. The base is horrible underneath. So with that amount of truck traffic, the residents are concerned what's going to happen to the road as the work is being done. And huge on the light pollution, I must say.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. So there was 3 items that you talked about: access, lighting, and then the road quality at the moment. So the access point, unfortunately, the lands that have been designated for future development only have one access point along Pettit Road and along Highway 3. Highway 3, we know we cannot get MTO approval to have any access there, so it has to come off of Pettit Road. I can't speak for how the lotting fabric has occurred in the past. Unfortunately, that's the only location for the ingress and egress into and out of the subdivision. So we can't change the location of the access point or where that new road is going to come from. There could be some suggestions that we can look through after draft approval, before final approval, to mitigate any type of light pollution from headlights coming from the road is what I'm hearing. That can be considered and has been thought of. So things that private landowners can do would be things like fencing, as well as landscaping or shrubbery that provides that kind of screening or streetscape if it's available. It's hard to determine that based on location of adjacent driveways and that sort of thing. So I can't fix all of those issues, but we can definitely say that we can look at them. The same with the photometrics plan. So each new subdivision is required to have street lighting incorporated into it. Obviously, safety concern as well. So the photometrics plan is a required condition of draft approval. So the applicant will have to submit a new plan showing the location of the street lighting and what kind of effects to minimize that. And any mitigation measures will also come out of that report. The last item would be the traffic and the quality of the road. So prior to any new developments occurring, the manager of operations does do a road occupancy permit where our operations staff will go out and take a look at the quality of the road and take photographic and video evidence of the quality of the road. Any damages to the road will be on the onus of the developer to fix after the fact.
Thank you. I hope that clarifies for everyone who is asking these questions.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman McClellan. Counselor, you're on mute.
What happened there? So sorry about that. So Lindsay, I'm just going to reiterate what Councilor Veet said. We had a number of complaints, and we talked about this prior when they came in last time. House 43282, 43280. They're both north and south of the roadway going in. On each abutting side, there should be fences put up by the developer. It shouldn't be the homeowner that bears that expense. And on the east side of Pettit Road, 43283 and 43281, again, a fence, shrubs, whatever the homeowner and the developer can agree to. I mean, it's, I don't know, maybe it's $6,000 all total for them. Maybe it's 10, I don't know, but it's a small price to pay for what you're doing. And at least these neighbors aren't going to get their houses washed with headlights all the time. So that should be one of the conditions in there. And then the other thing is, we asked for a security deposit or a letter of credit. So we just have to make sure the letter of credit is enough to cover any damages that are on Pettit Road. It's always, nobody wants to put that big a number in there, but it's a big number when you drive down. What are you going down? 10 lots, 12 lots to get to the site with all the concrete trucks and stone trucks and lumber wagons and that. So it's yeah, we're just going to have to make sure, Richard gets enough to cover it. That's all.
Ms. Earl.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor McClellan's comments about the cost being borne by the developer for the landscaping and or fencing on the properties that are on the west side of Pettit Road. Unfortunately, for the properties that are on the east side of Pettit Road, we cannot change the conditions for the draft plan of subdivision because it's only for the application subject property. So I can't put in conditions for the east side of the road. So that onus would be on the landowners. If it's possible. I know that the driveways align directly across from where the access would be. So it might be hard to implement any type of mitigation there.
Councilor McClellan, you want to speak?
I would tend to think if he was a good developer, he'd do it, especially if he wants to get our approval at the end.
Mr. Mayor, we can certainly push for that from a staff perspective. But again, as the manager indicated, from a sort of legally binding condition, because it's not part of the subject property itself, a little more difficult, but concur 100% with you, Councilor McClellan, that we can push the developer for that to make sure that they do not inconvenience the current residents in the area.
Any other comments or questions? Councilor Anderson?
Just a piece of, Lindsay, just a piece of technology. The banks of Montreal in Hamilton are looking at films, a film that goes on windows, and they're having a problem with cars pulling up, headlights flashing in, nobody in the building can see, nobody coming out of the building can see. And so they're looking at barrier sort of, you should call it a window wrap or a film. I'm not saying that that might work for the owner that is sort of directly at the end of this driveway, but they're still in the process of working through that, which film works best, which film is best reflective, which film, absorbs all the light so it doesn't come into your home and it disturb your internal environment. It's a blockage, you can see out. People can still see in, but it's reflective of interfering light. So I am aware of the company. I've been in touch with them. I can't guarantee where, in fact, that sort of scientific sort of process is happening, but it may be an answer for the owner that's going to take the brunt of headlights. But that's a go forward. And I'm not sure whether we can't impose the developer down the road 7 months from now to have to put films on the guy's windows. I mean, I just don't think that's part of contracting, but there are solutions that will facilitate the light pollution for him. And it's all new stuff that's sort of coming out. And I'm going to keep my eye on it for the resident, see what happens. Yep.
Councilor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, just on that vein, my only comment would be there's going to have to be a solution for that person or persons that are across, whether it's in the plan or whether it's not in the plan. There's going to have to be a solution, at least if it comes back here in the next 3 years. So just take that under advisement.
Sir Manfleet?
Through Chair, this has nothing to do with the light pollution. I'm just looking, Mark's not here, but does anybody know if the Section 78 has been started on the McCollum for the Big Forks? It says one of the conditions is the completion of the Section 78. And I know how much time that takes.
Mr. Mayor, we can find that information out for you for the next meeting.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay. Yeah, then I put the motion that planning staff report PSR 004-2023 be received and that draft plan of subdivision application P02-2021W for the lands described as concession 4 part lot 32 RP 59R 4745 part 1 Township of Wainfleet be approved for the reasons outlined in this report and subject to the conditions of draft approval in Appendix C, and that zoning bylaw amendment application Z06-2021W for the lands described as part or as concession for part lot 32 RP 59R 4745 Township of Wainfleet be approved for the reasons outlined in this report, and that the zoning bylaw amendment attached as Appendix D be adopted, and that applications be deemed to be consistent with the provincial policy statement 2020 and other matters of provincial interest. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor Gilmore. Councilor Van Fleet. Any other discussion? No, okay, we'll go to the recorded vote. Councilor McClellan.
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet.
In favor.
Councilor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councilor Anderson.
In favor.
In favor. Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to the fire staff report. Chief Alcock, would you like to give us a brief overview of your report?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I present this evening the 2022 annual review. As in the past 5 years, this is an annual review that provides a summary and a status of the personnel, operations, facilities, and apparatus and equipment of Wainfleet Fire and Emergency Services for 2022. As always, our volunteer firefighters provide an excellent service to the community, and I'm incredibly proud of their dedication and professionalism, and I think this report shows and highlights just what all they do. I won't go into detail with the report, but I will make sure that it's available on our website, and I'll have printed copies at the front if any citizen would like one. With that, I'm open for questions.
Any questions or comments? Councilor Anderson?
Through you, Mayor. Chief, are we graded for fire underwriters as a super tanker district?
At this time, we're not.
Any other questions? Councilor Van Fleet?
Not a question, just thank you, because we like to see these reports. They're nice, and thank you to all the members for everything you guys do. And I would encourage everybody to read this report.
Any other comments or questions? Nope. Okay, then I have a motion that fire staff report FSR 002/2023 regarding the 2022 annual report be received for information. Can I get a mover in a second? Councilor Anderson, Councilor Van Fleet. Any further discussion? And then I'll call the question of Councilor Anderson, sorry.
Through you, Mayor. Just wondering, Chief, would copies of this be available at the front desk for the public? A few copies, I'm not saying thousands, but
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. I can have them printed off and they'll be there tomorrow morning.
just a few, number of folks that are interested. Thank
For
you.
sure.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I'll go to the recorded vote of all in favor. Councilor McClellan,
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Councilor Gilmore,
Favor.
Councilor Anderson,
In favor?
and in favor, and that's carried. Okay, moving on to the, okay, all right. Moving on to the Public Works Staff Report. PWSR 001/2023, award of tender for the Pearson Bridge rehabilitation. Mr. Colasso, would you like to give us a brief overview of the report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, I will be brief try to speak on behalf of the manager of operations, big shoes to fill, but he couldn't be with us tonight. This is regarding a project which will see the reconstruction of the shared boundary bridge with the Township of West Lincoln, located on Boyle Road, just north of Regional Road 27. It's the Pearson Bridge is the official name of the structure. Again, it is a joint bridge owned jointly with West Lincoln. And there have been a number of years now that this project has sort of hit the books and had fallen off the books. But 2023 does appear to be the year that things are good to go. The project was first introduced during capital budget deliberations, the last two meetings in capital that you as a council have had. And the tender has been undertaken by West Lincoln Township. And at this stage, they have adopted and are prepared to proceed and are seeking the township commit its portion of the bridge works in the amount of $635,000 to allow for the reconstruction of that bridge. We are seeking council's approval for this. If anybody has any questions, I will try to answer. But again, West Lincoln has given the go-ahead to proceed, and now we're seeking Wainfleet's approval as well.
Councilman McCollum?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Colassa, I see the winning bid was $1,034,000. Half of that is just the 525 roughly that we had in our capital budget. And now we're asking for another 100,000. Do we own more than half of that bridge? We've got to pay a bigger share, or how is that set up?
For you, Mr. Mayor, no, we do not own more than half. The additional funds, I believe, are intended to cover off contingencies and the other elements of the contract that are in place in the event that certain issues are arisen during the construction project. Again, I'm trying to answer on behalf of the operations manager. I'm sure he'd be able to give you a good answer. But what we're seeking is approval up to the amount included in the budget to permit these projects to proceed.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. Then I have a motion that Public Works Staff Report PWSR 001-2023 respecting award of tender for the Pearson Bridge rehabilitation be received, and that council awards the tender submission of Anthony's Excavating Central Inc. in the amount of $1,034,502.12 excluding HST, and that council approved the Township of West Lincoln enter into an agreement with Anthony's Excavating Central Inc. for the shared ownership bridge, and that council approved the expenditure of the allotted $635,000 approved in the 2023 capital budget for the Pearson Road Bridge Rehabilitation Project. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor Gilmore, Councilor Van Fleet. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Okay, we'll go to the recorded vote. Councilor McCollum,
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Councilor Gilmore,
In favor.
Councilor Anderson,
In favor?
and in favor, and that's carried. Okay, review of correspondence. There are no items of correspondence listed on the agenda this evening. Are there any items that members of council would like pulled for consideration at this time? Seeing none, I have a motion that bylaw number 010-2023 being a bylaw pursuant to the provisions of section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend zoning bylaw number 581-78 of the Corporation of the Township of Wainfleet with respect to those lands conforming to Part Lot 32, Concession 4, RP 59, R 4745, Part 1 in the Township of Wainfleet. Can I get a mover and seconder? Councilor Gilmore, Councilor McCollum. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, then we will just go to the vote. Councilor McCollum,
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Councilor Gilmore,
In favor.
Councilor Anderson.
In favor?
Okay, in favor, so that is carried. Are there any notice of motion from members of council? No, okay, I'll go on to mine. I've been a couple of residents have contacted me regarding the accessory building restrictions in the zoning bylaw. And so I'll be bringing forward a motion at our next council meeting to direct staff to review the accessory building zoning requirements and to provide recommendations for changes. Now, after saying that, I have a motion that council now move into the closed session to discuss item under section 239 2E litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, one matter, a litigation matter. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councilor Gilmore and Councilor Anderson. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. Councilor McCullen,
In favor.
Councilor Van Fleet,
In favor.
Councilor Gilmore,
In favor.
Councilor Anderson,
Favor?
in favor, and that is carried. We'll move into closed session.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Hello.
Councilor McCullen, can you hear me?
Yeah, Do I just stay on? Because I didn't get another Zoom meeting invite.
Meredith's going to send you a link.
I think that's a. Okay, thanks.
Yep.